Guess who's coming to dinner? It's been more than 40 years since Hollywood's first interracial kiss in that movie by the same name shocked mainstream America. But today, Canada's multicultural society is increasingly showing signs that love is colorblind. Hello and welcome to Ottawa Experts. I'm your host, Barbara Balfour, and on tonight's show, we'll be talking about interfaith, interethnic, and intercultural relationships and the secrets to their success. We've got a great lineup of guests tonight. First, I'd like to introduce Leah Williams-McInnes. She's born and raised in Ottawa, a Caribbean Canadian with a father from Grenada and a mother from Barbados. She's the product of an interracial relationship and in an interracial marriage to a gentleman of Scottish Canadian extraction. And she's also quite the academic on the subject, having completed her master's degree on racially mixed individuals. Leah, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Next up, we have Nataxja Cini, a couples therapist and founder of Family Therapy in Ottawa in 2007. She's here to provide some perspective and advice on how intercultural couples can connect in a positive and respectful manner and create strong bonds over a lifetime. Thank you so much for joining us, Nataxja.
Thank you for the invitation.
Later in the show, we'll actually have a third guest joining us on the telephone, Karen Larche. Karen is a French-Canadian Roman Catholic who's married to a Pakistani-Canadian Muslim for more than 20 years. They have two beautiful kids together, and she'll be telling us a little bit about their success stories, so stick around for that. But in the meantime, I'm so excited to have you ladies join us tonight. And you know, when I was talking to someone about the show earlier tonight, I was telling them that I wanted to do the show on intercultural and interethnic relationships, and their reaction was, oh, so you'll talk about all the problems that result and how they don't work? And I said, well, actually, it's the opposite. I'm going to talk about the success stories and how to actually make them work. And Leah, you obviously have a very positive outlook on intercultural relationships, and I want to hear a little bit more about your story and how it started with your parents, how it led you to complete a master's degree on the subject, and where you are today with your beautiful blended family. Actually, if we can throw up a photo on the screen right now, Leah had sent us a photo earlier today of her gorgeous baby, 4 months old, and husband.
Thank you.
No, that's actually our next guest, Karen. We've got a photo of Leah and her husband and her baby, so we'll just pull that up in a minute. But in the meantime, tell us a little bit about how it all got started.
Okay, so my mom's from Barbados. She's mixed, so has Caucasian, so white and black as well. There's also a little bit of Aboriginal, like the indigenous in Barbados. So Barbados is quite a melting pot. My father, his mother was from Venezuela, and his father's from Trinidad. So, you know, both of them quite mixed and blended, and they both never really kind of pointed out to me like the difference of the races. I was just kind of like, okay, this is how we're growing about everything. It wasn't until we went on a trip to Grenada to visit my dad's family that a man actually stopped him on the street and said, where did you get this German woman?
And he was referring to your mother?
To my mother. And my mother was like completely shocked, and she goes, I'm black. And she doesn't, she'll hate that I say this, but she doesn't really look black. She's very tall, she's got freckles, very light skin, and red hair. So
wow.
Everyone has always kind of been like, are you adopted? Is that really, are those really your parents? And like, yeah, this is, you know, I look like my father, but this is my mom. And they're like, oh, okay. So my mom's always struggled since she was a little girl with name calling. She looks very different to her siblings, but her siblings as well, even though having darker skin, will have lighter colored eyes, gray eyes, green eyes. So you can always see the blend in them.
These were the attitudes in Barbados?
In Barbados.
Okay.
And then coming to Canada, it doesn't really stop. So with my peers, it was always brought to my attention. So I've kind of had a love to kind of delve into interracial issues and just kind of figure everything out. And that's why when I did my communications degree at Royal Roads, I decided that I really wanted to be passionate about it and look at it from a media perspective on how television was dictating how we kind of, where we go. So where we decide to, like, who we decide to be with. Because commercials they influence us on our buying choices. Well, they also influence us on who we want to end up being with. So there's the Cheerios commercial where we see a mixed couple with a beautiful mixed, it was a black father and a white mother with a beautiful mixed girl. And people wrote in saying how upset they were to see this blended family on television. And this was just a couple of years ago.
So were these Americans or Canadians?
It was American. So a lot of Americans were writing in. So I know Canada, we're much more evolved, but we still get that television and we still have that mindset. I was mentioning to you guys off air before about my daughter. She's I had a fear that she wasn't going to look like me, and I felt it came true because
We see it on the screen. She's very light.
she's very light-skinned, and she looks everything like my husband. So my first thing to my colleagues was, I'm going to look like a nanny.
Yeah.
I'm really worried that people won't think she's mine. And sure enough, I have had a couple comments where people have thought that maybe she wasn't my child, and I've had to reinforce that, yes, she's my kid. She's starting to slowly look like me with the features, but I was kind of like a victim to my own study on what I was looking into. So it's been a learning curve, but it's something I think is really important to talk about for that, because we see lots of mixed couples, and for the children as well, like children coming into this world, how do they want to identify? How is it going to be for them? Where they have this openness to be able just to be with any culture and not have anyone judge them or kind of determine. And I don't want to be one of those parents that says, oh, you're dating this person? I never want to put that on my child. We really have a very open kind of philosophy in our household and very accepting.
I want to hear what you think about this, Nataxja.
Well, it makes a difference. I mean, we want to label things because I think when we can put a label on something, like, okay, this is a mug, then you understand the concept. And there was this interesting article I read, actually, I didn't bring this up, a couple of weeks ago I read, where this fellow was talking about if we stopped labeling people, you are a person, right? You know, and there's also this other part that starts saying, should we even label gender? Because we're discovering gender for some people is trans.
It's very fluid.
It's fluid, and we may be born with one type of gender paraphernalia, and you don't identify with what you have been physically given. So if we actually can stop labeling race and color, what a difference it would make. Because then we can't really actually target anybody if we're just human, as opposed to, oh, are you African Canadian or are you African American? Who am I, right? And even for myself, I look white, but for myself, I don't necessarily 100% identify white. I identify as Mediterranean, but there's no checkbox on that list of that for me, because I don't feel that I see white as being British, and they don't necessarily have the same things and understandings and cultural beliefs that I have. And so culture can play a role, but I think we make more of it than it should be sometimes.
My husband would totally agree with you on that, because I have a tendency when I'm trying to point someone out, I will immediately be like, oh, that black person or that white person. He was like, if it's the only person standing there, just say that person. And I'm like, you're right. And he's really tried to train me just to be like, doesn't matter about the race or the color of their skin. It's you just identify that person.
Right. And I'm going to pick on your poor husband because he probably hasn't had to experience as much as you have.
That's true.
Right?
That's
because
true.
I mean, with being white, we don't get discrimination. Now we're starting to have people who hate us because we're white, but they don't live really next door to us.
No, exactly.
Right? But as being a person of color, you're different than me. So even anybody at school when you were growing up would have immediately it's visible.
Absolutely. And that's what I was telling my husband, like, I'm so used to having to be like, well, I'm black. Like, I remember in kindergarten, a little girl one time asked me, do you taste like brown cow, that syrup that you mix in? Because, and it's just the innocence. So it happens so young, because you see something that's different, that's not regular in your household. So you're exploring. You're
curious.
Yeah, you want to know. So I've always been, not necessarily on the defense, but I've always brought it out, kind of like, yeah, I'm black, or now that I've known my history and a little bit background, I'll say that I'm a mixed origin. And people kind of be like, well, you don't really look like you're mixed origin. And that's where the conversation starts. So that's why I enjoy that. So I take the opportunity to talk about, the studies and what I've done and how, just because I look this color doesn't mean I don't have necessarily like a white background.
And why do you have to justify it?
It's true.
Right? And which is the worst part, is you have to justify it because people aren't satisfied with that
It's true.
And that's so sad. I mean, it's like being the token person in the room. Oh, I need someone. Oh, well, let's invite Leah over because she's a person of color. She'll fit this party, or she'll be good for this cause. And that's not fair because we don't get that as white people.
And we maybe don't get it as much in the dating scene. I want to hear a little bit about how you were made to feel that way, Leah, when you were dating.
Yeah, so when I started dating, I started online dating for a little bit. It was very challenging because I would meet these individuals and it was almost like these males were checking off a box. So they were
like an ice cream flavor.
Yeah, I was getting questions like, so have you experienced any opposition from the person, like their family, about you being a black person? Like, were they accepting? And I don't usually run into that problem, but if there's something I'm going to run into with your family, then, you know, I might as well step away from this now because I don't want to deal with that. But there was always, like, even with black men, there was always that as well, where they were kind of like, oh, so are you from Africa? Like, what part of Africa are you from exactly? I'm like, well, no, actually, I was born in Canada. My parents are Caribbean. Oh, okay. Like, there's still that, like, cultural shift, even in that hub of being the same color skin.
And on the
but
flip
not-
side, were you made to feel like a trophy sometimes?
Absolutely. So that's what I was saying when I was saying check off the box, like, hey, look, check it out. I'm with a black girl. Like, no, I don't want to be put on display. That's not what I'm here for. Like, I'm really looking for a serious relationship and a partner, not someone that's going to.
And you weren't always considered material for a serious relationship.
No, it was always kind of like, oh, this will be fun. Like, I've never, you know, that your bucket list that you get. So it's on someone's bucket list, like, date a black girl. That'd be a great thing to say I did.
Or sometimes also being a bit rebellious. Let's get back at mom and dad,
Yes.
and let's bring her home and see how mom and dad squirm or how grandpa feels.
And I've had that happen
And
to
that's
like
yeah.
with a couple of females that I know who've gone off and said, like, that's it, I'm only going to date black guys from now on, like on this rebellious stage, and had that opposition from their parents. We're like, no, that you are not coming home with a black man. Like, there's no way. So and it happens either or, but it was that rebellious stage where it was like, I've got to, you know, really prove them wrong and do something completely different. Even if they're not invested, that's not really what they wanted to do. They were just doing it for show.
Is having your race exoticized or fetishized as bad as you know, being seen as lesser or being demeaned against? Is it also a form of racism?
It is a form of racism because, I mean, when you have people saying, oh, well, all right, even within a certain religion, they were talking, I was online looking up things as well, preparing for today, and they were talking about, you know, if you are from this religion but you come from Saudi Arabia versus you come from Pakistan or Bangladesh, you're going to have problems and maybe you should marry somebody from that group. I mean, it's so there is, even within the own culture, there is racism. Even from where my parents come from, it's really funny. There's the south side of the island and the north side of the island. Oh,
Malta.
Yeah, Malta. I mean, it's like it's smaller than the island of Montreal. And if you come from this area, you're snobby and you're rich. But if you come from this area, you're the worker bees, and they don't want to connect with each other. And you think, how can even with 300,000 people, there's racism even against each other?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I remember as a child growing up, even with the West Indies, it was the same thing. Like, if you were from one island and not from the other, oh no, you know, you don't get involved with that person. Like, you don't go and date someone necessarily from Barbados. Like, it was stuff like that. And I remember hearing that as a child.
So how did your parents overcome that?
My mom, because she identified herself as being black, she did fight a little bit, like, people with the questions and her skin type, but for my daddy, he never saw it. So they lived their lives and just like, you know what, this is our family, this is how we're going to be. And they communicated really well. They were just like, they saw the individual. That's what it was. They didn't look at, you know, okay, you're a little bit lighter. Like, I never heard my dad tease my mom about her skin color or anything. It was just very accepting, even though his family were kind of like, oh, you know, you married that white woman. He never let that affect his decision. Like, he let it roll off his back and lived their lives. And he was fun. They were fun together. They just enjoyed life and didn't make it an issue. Like, it was never an issue.
Isn't it interesting that there's some sort of idea or notion about marrying up if you marry into a certain race or marrying down?
Yes.
Where does that come from?
Stereotypes?
Yeah.
I mean, like, just think about it. All right, if I marry somebody who's Japanese or Chinese, my kids will be smart and they'll probably be thin, right? Or if I marry, I'm trying to think of another culture, but I mean, these beliefs that we have that certain cultures have certain, you know, hardworking people, or, you know, the ones who are drunks, or the ones who are just the fun girls, or, you know, if I married from someone this race, you know, was it French or Italian, who are the better lovers, right? Or I marry somebody from the Middle East, she'll be docile and obedient, right? So we have these stereotypes in our mind, and sometimes we actually choose, and I've seen that happen, where you choose a spouse from that ethnic group because you're going for this ideal, this belief, this from TV, this fantasy,
exactly.
right? It's a fantasy that, you know, she'll be quiet and she'll obey me and I can rule the roost. And it's rather sad because then when the real person comes in, what about my own personality, my own characteristics, my upbringing? It may not match what people imagine. And then you run into problems because you can't be dominant over somebody who actually was raised and educated, or you know, you may have children who aren't going to be good at math. They may be dyslexic, or they may grow fat. And so it is sad when people choose people based on a belief that's not based in reality.
I think it's also sad when people choose to stick within their own community, believing that their marriages will last longer or they'll be happier, because that's not necessarily the truth.
No, I completely agree. And it goes back to what you were saying, stereotypes. Like what my research paper clearly came up with that as an answer when I studied commercials and what commercials were kind of dictating us to like which path to go, how they always made anybody that was white be really successful and always doing their best and never on the down and out. Asians were always very smart and well educated, and then the black community was always kind of like the blue collar. They were like struggling, they weren't doing, yeah, exactly, they weren't doing well, or they were the ones that were like on the down and out. They were like, you know, on the poverty line. It was always depicted that way in commercials, and that's the stereotype. Like the producers behind all of these things are kind of pumping this information to us for us to accept and be like, yeah, that's how it is, that's okay.
But if you look at movies across different cultures, it is, like you said, the whitest and the palest. Even in India, it's not the dark kids who become the movie stars. Even in Japan or even Korea. Look at Korea.
Korea's really bad for that.
Oh, it's beyond bad. They do plastic surgery to make them look beautiful. And the ideal of beauty is a Western face, a Western nose, cheekbones. I mean, there was one case that I remember reading about where they got married and she had all this plastic surgery, and then they had children. The children were like, and the husband was so angry. He was going. I think he
false advertising.
Exactly. I think he was going to divorce her because this was not the package she married into.
When you talk about westernized ideas of beauty, I was telling you ladies earlier about a conversation I had with my taxi driver on my way to the studio, and I was telling him about the show. He was a gentleman of Somalian extraction, and he was telling me, you know, I'll be honest with you, as a black man, I find the lighter-skinned black women more attractive. Caramel color, like Beyonce, like Rihanna.
That's your commercialism and advertising.
Yeah, and I asked him why. I don't know, they're just prettier, but why? Oh, it's not a racist thing, we just find them prettier. But he couldn't really explain why. It's at a subconscious level, isn't it?
Absolutely, and that's where media plays a part. It kind of just, you know, like it just forces you with all these ideas and the way you should think, and that it's okay. So like the Beyoncés of this world having this like perfect hourglass shaped body, every woman should have that body. It goes right across the board. Like all black women should have straight hair. Like I used to have really straight hair, and I kind of fell into that whole, like, this is how I'm supposed to look as a black woman. And I'm like, no, I'm gonna go and have natural kinky hair and be able to shave my head and it be okay. And I don't have to look like all those women that they show me on TV.
But even also look at the makeup, all this whitening. So I mean, the Japanese women, how much money do they spend in trying to whiten their skin? And even we look at, if you go back to Victorian times, there was the women were getting lead poisoning from trying to whiten their skins as well.
Yeah. It's endemic in India. The skin whitening?
Yeah.
Do you see that in the Caribbean population?
Not very often. Like it would be really hard to go off and try to do that. It would need a lot of work done. You don't really see that very often, but in certain islands you will kind of see where the lighter skins will kind of stick together a little bit and be there, and the darker skinned people will be a little bit like we'll be together and mingle more and marry. You see that sometimes, but I found in Barbados, I didn't really see that, but Barbados is kind of a melting pot. There's so much, like everyone's got kind of a caramel skin color to them across the board.
Ladies, we're just about to go to break, but when we come back, we'll be joined by our third guest tonight, Karen Larche. She's a French-Canadian Roman Catholic married to a Pakistani-Canadian Muslim for more than 20 years, and she'll be talking to us about the secrets for her success. And if you have any questions for our viewers tonight or any comments you'd like to make from your personal experience, I'd like to encourage you to call the number at the bottom of your screen. We're excited to hear from you. Don't go away. We'll be right back. welcome to Ottawa Experts. I'm your host, Barbara Balfour, and on tonight's show we're talking about intercultural, interethnic, interfaith marriages and how to make them work. There is no better index of racial and cultural integration than intermarriage, and Canada is leading the pack. In 2007, a poll showed 92% of Canadians approve of mixed marriages, and the latest figures show that we have more than 360,000 couples in mixed unions in Canada. And one of them is our third guest tonight, Karen Larche, who is joining us on the telephone. Karen, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hi, Barbara.
Hi, Karen. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
We were all fascinated by your story. French-Canadian, Roman Catholic, meets, falls in love with a Pakistani-Canadian Muslim boy, makes it work. 20 years later, still happily married, two beautiful children.
It's still going very strong.
Tell us how it got started.
Well, we met. I was a waitress. He came for a bite to eat. I served him, and we just started talking. I knew he had a ring. Many Muslim men sometimes wear this. It's like a Allahu Akbar. It's an Allah sign ring, and I noticed it on his finger. And I said, Allahu Akbar, and he said, oh, wow, hi. And then we just started talking, and then we dated. He would come and see me for 9 months, and I would never leave the establishment with him.
So you were just friends?
We were just friends, and we built up a strong friendship, and we really got to know each other.
Was it because you had some initial concerns?
No, I had gotten out of a bad relationship, and I wasn't rushing into anything with any man, no matter who or where or how nice his smile was. I was just taking things really slow, and that I stood fast to that.
And so what attracted you to each other?
Well, I had always growing up, I grew up in Gatineau, and I have always had a fondness for the exotic. I always liked, not exotic, but brown hair, brown eyes. I was never blonde, blue-eyed. You know, it could be French-Canadian blonde. Didn't like them. Brunette, liked them. He fit the picture, like physically, right?
Yeah.
And his smile and his calm composure and his demeanor, and he was very polite and very kind. And he just, he said I could speak for him, actually. Said that, he said, you were funny. He said, you were honest. You knew where I was coming from. And we just laughed, and we respected each other right from the get-go.
When did you get to meet the parents?
I got to meet the parents. A long story. We ended up moving in together, and I didn't meet the parents until maybe a year and a half after we've moved in together.
And so the fact
and it wasn't even in their home. It was in a park in Toronto because they just couldn't bring it to invite me into their home yet.
How did that make you feel?
I was okay with it. Because I understood where they were coming from, and just the fact that they wanted to meet me, I found, well, they're making a step in my direction. I can either just be insulted, or I could be the bigger person also and make a step in their direction until finally somewhere we'll meet in the middle.
And was it an issue that you two were living together outside of marriage
for
both of your families?
It was, and then we had that big ice storm.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah. And we had just gotten into a car accident, and I hadn't spoken to his parents yet, but I took it upon myself to call them, to reach out to them, to tell them, look, I'm his girlfriend, I'm the one living with him, you guys know about me, even though you won't speak to me. I just want to put your mind at rest that I'm taking care of him. We can't leave the city, we're in quarantine right now because of the ice storm, but I promise you that I'm taking care of your son. And that is kind of like what reassured them that, well...
He was in good hands.
I think so.
That really required you to put your pride on the line, didn't it?
Well, I love him.
Yeah.
And they made him.
Yeah.
And I was raised to respect my elders. It doesn't matter what color or religion, you're human. You have a child. I could just imagine what his mother was going through. He's an only child. And I took it upon myself to reach out to her.
And so at what point did you decide to get married, and did you get the blessing of his parents and your parents? I mean, how did your parents react?
Oh, my mother. It was really funny. Very, very quick story. So the first time I introduced him was on Christmas. So I called my mother, and I said, I'm bringing this guy home, and he's Pakistani, Muslim. And she's like, okay, sure. And my sisters, I have 4 sisters, said, "Oh, so is Karen coming for Christmas dinner?" And my mother said, "Yeah, and she's bringing her boyfriend." And they said, "Oh, okay, well, what's this guy?" Because I was always dating all kinds of people. And she said, "I don't know what he is, but he has a job." that's all. That's all. And she sounded happy. That's all she ever cared about. My mother has loved him from the moment she laid eyes on him. And I have to tell you, the moment I got out of the car and his parents walked towards me, I was very nervous. But his father actually pushed his mother aside very gently and gave me a hug.
That's amazing.
And I turned around and I looked at my husband, and then she came over to me, and she gave me a hug, and she whispered in my ear, she goes, "Oh, my God, thank God, you're so beautiful." And I turned and I looked at my husband, and he had tears in his eyes, and I said, "What's wrong with you?" And he said, "I have never seen my father touch another woman."
That's true.
Wow, so he really put his own
Yeah.
religious beliefs on the side to kind of meet you halfway.
Yeah, and then we just sat there, and we just started talking. And I have a bit of a sense of humor. I know how to, ease the awkwardness, and we had fun. It's a good meeting. And then eventually I went over to their place. I slept in one room. He slept in one, and that was fine with me. That wasn't a cultural thing. That was just a respect thing. We weren't married yet. And then after living together for like 3-4 years, his mother was hounding him. "Okay, when are you going to marry this woman? Like, when are you going to make an honest woman out of her? You just can't use a woman. We didn't raise you that way."
That's great. That's refreshing.
Yeah. Well, they were good parents, and they still are. Yeah.
Wow. So what kinds of compromises or concessions have you each had to make over your 20 years together?
Patience. As far as religion goes, not much. He doesn't really attend the mosque that much. When he's with his parents, he does. They pray. They pray 5 times a night. His father, used to teach Islam. His mother wears a hijab. My children get called by his parents, my in-laws, 3 to 4 times a week, which they recite the Quran. And
but they also go to a French-Canadian Catholic school.
They go to a French-Canadian Catholic school, that's right. That wasn't by choosing because it's a Catholic school. That was just because it was the best school around.
Okay.
And I'm Catholic.
So you weren't asked to convert?
No, not once. Not once. I was told earlier on that it was never really an issue for them as long as I respected them. And because they're Islamic, I'm no Islamic scholar by any means, but the men are allowed to marry within the 5 major faiths.
Yes.
However, the women, if they're Islamic, should only marry Islamic men. So he got the pass there. He could marry me because I was Catholic. So that was never really an issue, as long as I respected their faith. And I was very curious about their faith before I even met my husband. So that was easy.
So people say that faith has a way of sneaking up on you all of a sudden when kids enter the picture. How did your marriage change when kids came in?
My mother-in-law wanted me, I think with us it wasn't really an issue of culture and religion. It was more a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law issue. She wanted me to name my firstborn son after her father-in-law.
Which was?
Which was Abdul Rahim, da-da-da-da-da-da.
And that was right around September 11.
Yes, it was. And I thought, this is horrible. And I said to my husband, "Honey, this is horrible, but I want my son to be able to get a job, or to people to actually look at his resume and not just dismiss it based on his name. I'm afraid. So can we compromise?" And I said to both my sides of my family, "Can we compromise? Can I find a name that's in the Quran and in the Bible?" And to make both sides happy, and they were very happy with it. And now my son has 3 kids named after him in Pakistan.
Oh, wow.
So
You started a trend.
yeah, I did. Yeah. Well, my husband is the firstborn, the only born in his family, first child that came over of 2 people that were very popular, and then everybody followed them and had their children after him. So my husband was like a little prince that everybody wanted their daughters to marry.
Oh, my goodness.
I actually got this after I married him, and I went to someone's home, and all the girls said, come and sit with us and look at pictures and stuff. And I'm like, okay. And he said, "Do you know how much we wanted to marry your husband? Do you know this?" I'm like, "Sorry."
He's mine now.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about some of the boundary setting that you had to do at the beginning of your relationship, especially. You were telling me earlier, you made a very powerful statement that we teach people how we want to be treated.
Yes, absolutely. So I had been in a few relationships that didn't work.
Were they intercultural?
Yeah. Some were, some weren't.
Okay.
And I had always ended up at the raw end of the stick. I lost everything, material-wise.
Mm-hmm.
So after a while, when he would come back and date back and forth, finally I said, you know what? I'm not getting any younger. I want to get married. I want to have children. You know, you have to tell me what we're doing here. And he said, I want to be with you. I said, well, okay, what does that mean? And he said, well, I want to move down. I want to get a job down there. I want to move with you. I said, well, okay, fine. You can do it. You sell everything but your electronics because I have a really crappy TV. And he did. And he left everything behind, and he came with me. But I said to him, I said, when dating, I said straight out, are you going to get married one day again? And he's like, yes, I'm going to get married one day. Okay. Do you see yourself marrying me? Yes. Okay, well, if I marry you, I'm not converting. And he's like, I wouldn't want you to convert. And my children are just, the main thing for me is that they're going to be good people before anything else. And we had these discussions before moving in together.
And that's a very mature outlook.
Yeah. I didn't go into this with my eyes closed and, you know, the big love every time he came into the room. And, you know, I think too many people want to be the princess at the wedding, but they don't remember what it's like to be married at home.
I think a lot of people don't even know what it means to get married. And you sound like you really have thought this through based on the other relationships you've had. You came to a point where, you know what, I don't want it the short end of the stick.
Yep.
I know what I want in a relationship. And you actually put your needs right out there. And I think that's really important. A lot of times when people look at marriage, it's a fantasy. Exactly. The princess thing. I get to wear a crown for the day. It's about a beautiful dress. But then you forget when you go home after the party, somebody has to do the dishes, somebody has to do the garbage, and someone has to pay the bills.
That's right.
That's very true.
And you know, I really think that people, not just women, but people need to be honest with themselves going into any relationship, knowing what they want and what they see in the long term for themselves and where they see themselves. And they need to have these kind of discussions before giving their heart to anybody in which way or form and in any serious level of commitment. Or they're going to be sad because they're going to be like, well, why weren't my expectations met? Well, you never had the conversation to begin with. At least give the chance to say, well, no, I don't want to go there.
Karen, can I ask you about how old you were when you entered this relationship?
I was 26.
Which I mean, I think that's a middle, because we're changing so much from our 19s to 30s. You already got past the age of, oh, the guy makes all the rules. I need to give up myself and lose my identity in my boyfriend.
I was always like that, though.
But I think that's important. I think a lot of people don't have that maturity.
No.
And you definitely, you know, exactly. How do we be honest with ourselves? Most people don't even know, like, what do they want for breakfast.
You can get hurt so much, and you can only burn your hands so much before you have to say, I really have to stop putting my hand on that burner.
That's true.
Yes. Yeah, you learned that the heat wasn't any good anymore, and I wasn't going to do that anymore.
I don't want to touch that burner anymore. I'm going to go and look over at the cool burner that's cold here. Let's just go and, you know how we all like they always say, oh, they always go through the bad boys until they wake up, and then we go for the good boy.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was thinking.
And that's what happened. And it had nothing to do with culture or religion. I grew up in Gatineau. There was never, my mother's Irish, French, Canadian, my father's completely French, and there was never any talk about the N-word or that kind of person or this person. Never. It was like, you're human. That's it. Yeah. There was never any kind of... if anything, it was like, I would get a lot of this, I don't know who you think you are, but you're human, and everybody else is, and you you guys all go to the bathroom the same way, and everybody's the same, so you're no better or no less than anyone else. Everybody's equal.
Karen, you made a really powerful comment about how sometimes culture is used as an excuse for men to not commit or just general bad behavior. Can you expand a bit on that?
My husband, I brought this up with my husband a while ago, and he even agreed. He said, unfortunately, there's either the ones that are just straight up cold-hearted players, that they use this at the end of the day as an excuse. Well, you know what? You're not Muslim, and my mom really wants me to marry this person, and I don't want to lose my whole family.
I can't choose between you and my family.
Yeah, I can't see you there because, I love you so much. I wouldn't want you to lose your freedom by trying to be married to me because of how my family is and all that stuff. And then he said there's the kind of guys that are raised, and it's not just Islam, it's any religion or culture, that they're raised by their mothers, and they don't go to, so they're born here, but they go to school with white people and different cultures and stuff, but at the end of the day, they're only allowed to socialize with their own. And so they grow up with it, and that's all they know, and that's all they've been permitted to. So they go on thinking that if I just put my foot out of this circle, I'm going to lose everything that's in the circle. And is it worth it? Is it worth, what if she leaves me? Like, he left everything. I could have dumped him the week after he moved in with me, And, I mean, that's a lot to ask from someone. And it could be very hard for them, too. I think it depends on the individual. And again, I go back to, what do they want out of their life? Do they want to be married to a woman who is like their mother and their sisters, who will cater to them and, make sure they have a warm meal and, iron their clothes and, do the old domestic thing? Or do they want just a woman based on her mind, her values, her sense of humor, her idea of who she is?
And it's your husband who does most of the cooking and cleaning.
He does all the cooking and all the cleaning in my house.
I think you won the lottery.
I did. He's a fantastic man.
We're getting towards the end of our segment and our time together, unfortunately, so I wanted to ask you if you had any final thoughts. And I was also really curious, what do you guys fight about and how do you resolve it?
What do we fight about?
I don't think they fight about anything.
Yeah.
Let me see. We don't really fight about anything. It's because if I have a problem, I say it. He discusses. We discuss it. Yeah. And that's it. I don't hold back, but I don't insult either. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Final thoughts. Anybody, doesn't matter what color you are, where you're from, and this is very naive thinking because I don't think it's the norm. Just know who you are before trying to get something from someone else. Take them for who they are, because people don't change. At the end of the day, they don't change. They are who they are.
That's true.
You have a lot of wisdom there, Karen. You're absolutely right. And unfortunately, people try to get into marriages thinking either I'm going to rescue somebody or I'm going to change their behavior or somehow, even though we don't agree on anything, love will make it work.
No, I'm sorry. At the end of the day, love won't take care of your children when they have fevers. Yeah. Love won't pay your mortgage. Yeah. Love, the things that cause stress on marriages, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Finances, children.
Sex,
my daughter right
money,
now, she's turning into this beautiful young woman. And, I was just kind of waiting, well, is my husband's going to go, like, crazy Muslim on me kind of thing? And he's like, no. She can wear whatever size dress she wants. She could, you know what I mean? Like,
It sounds like the two of you actually know how to put issues on the table. You discuss them open-mindedness. No one's on top of each other, and you both listen, and that's so important.
There's no power game. There's no mind control, and it's so refreshing to hear.
There's no power. There's no he's the man, I'm the woman, here's your roles. No, it's we're both human beings. Yeah. That's it.
You guys are a perfect example of a true friendship and true partnership.
Yeah, he's my best friend.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It really is. And I wish this on anyone and everyone I know.
Karen, thank you so much for
Thank
your
you,
time,
ladies.
for joining us this evening, and for telling us such an amazing success story. I wish
Thank you.
we could put more success stories out
Just
there in the
be
open.
confident in yourself, ladies. And men, too, be confident in yourselves.
Thank you so much. Don't go away. We'll be right back with more tips and stories. Make sure you call into the show at the number at the bottom of your screen. We're excited to hear your questions, comments, concerns. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to Ottawa Experts. I'm your host, Barbara Balfour, and we're talking about intercultural, interethnic, and interfaith marriages and relationships and how to make them work. We're joined in the studio with guests Nataxja and Leah. I wanted to go back to your story, Leah. Tell me a little bit about how you met your husband and what makes your relationship work as a mixed union.
Okay, so I met my husband actually from a dating site, an online dating site. I was off for a while because my experiences, as you know, were not great. I was kind of like, I think I need to get away from this. I went back on and we connected and we began dating, and he is a great person. He's very down to earth. He's funny. He keeps me on my toes, and he's a great parent. Like, to see him with my daughter is our daughter, I should say, not mine, but it's just amazing to see him like now as a father. We were talking about it together, like what makes our relationship work, and it's communication, laughter. He has said that, you got to put the laughter in there, and
Sense of humor.
And he does. He has way better sense of humor than I do. I can be very uptight at times, and he just kind of breaks that down. And patience and listening and being kind really does do it. And he's very good at not looking at color or race, but just at the person, like looking at the human and who you are. And it's like you were saying, like looking at being a human, not as, I'm in this culture or I'm this color, just who you are. And that's what makes it work. And I can't say enough good things about him. He always asks, like, what did you talk about today about me? And I'm like, oh, I can't tell you. I don't want it to go to your head. So I'm not going to say too much more because I'm sure he's watching. It'll go to his head. But he's a wonderful person.
And I want to go back to that, but we've got a caller. Therese, are you on the line?
Yes, hello, ladies.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Did you have a question for our guests?
Yes, my niece has been in an interracial and intercultural relationship now for the last 4 years. Her parents live in Halifax, and she's here in Ottawa. And, gradually she went on with this relationship and built it, and they finally moved together just recently. And in the beginning, she was trying to approach the subject with her father, who's a really old-fashioned and very traditionalist. And every time she tried to utter a word or even put it out there, it never went really well. So he was very clear that this is not going to happen, and he never wants to hear about this again. So because they're not living in the same city, I guess it was easier for her to just carry on with her life and all. And now they've moved together, and they're even planning a future together. They're talking about kids. Both of them are in their 30s now. And now her father is coming in town, not too long. And we're really encouraging her. You're going to have to, face your demons and, just make it clear to your dad that this is what you've chosen and you've moved on. Mm-hmm. Now, should she say it over the phone or should she wait till he comes?
What do you ladies think?
I would just say wait till Dad comes. I mean, Dad's already where she's in this relationship. Yeah. She's in her 30s. She's independent. And, I tell my kids, you got to live your life for you. Yeah. I mean, her dad's going to be disappointed, but he has to learn how to live with that disappointment. And she has to live her life to the best of her abilities.
That's true. It's almost as if she has to take on a role of educating her father. And unfortunately, that's what she might have to do. Hopefully, he'll be open once she kind of is able to express to him, this is my life and this is what I've chosen to do. But there is an education that has to happen there. So she's going to have to kind of put her foot down and say, this is what I've chosen to do, this is my life, and this is the future we have planned, and kind of lay it out for him. but educate them on how, that this is an acceptable thing and it's okay in this day and age.
And I think she also needs to be prepared for disappointment.
Absolutely.
I mean, I would suggest, if she wants to introduce Dad to her boyfriend, do it somewhere public so that at least Dad could maybe forced to be on his best behavior. But don't be surprised if you're meeting at, I'll say, Starbucks, and hi Dad, this is, and Dad goes, that's it, I'm not talking, and gets up and leaves. That she should be prepared for that type of reaction.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's as sad as that is, it may happen.
Yeah.
One of my girlfriends actually, she studied in Vancouver, and she married a fellow who was Oriental. Her parents were so against it, and her parents didn't come around until she had children, which is so sad.
All those wasted years.
Exactly. So I mean, that they live out in Vancouver and parents live here, and in her family there's 2 kids. She's the only daughter. I mean, it is so hard when your parents don't approve, and at 30 you don't need your parents' approval. That's such a hard thing to actually swallow.
What kind of arguments do you think she could put forth that are maybe stronger than it's my life and it's my decision?
I don't think she should have to actually even have those arguments. I mean, it's just live your life. And Dad, I mean, I wish you could get to know him the way I know him. I understand you may have some difficulties with this. I'm willing to talk with you about the difficulties. And if you can meet, my boyfriend, that would be wonderful. But unfortunately, sometimes we don't control what someone else does. We don't.
Yeah, and that's why I say, we can't, she'll have to educate in the best way she can, as in, this is the decision I've made. But it's what you said as well. She shouldn't have to defend herself to her father on why she's making those decisions, especially at 30 years old. He should be able to accept it. Yeah, because it doesn't matter about, it shouldn't matter. If there was a reason for him to have this feeling, as in the person's personality, and he had met the individual and felt that way, that's another story. But not giving the person a chance and not even meeting this young man and having a conversation. I think
It's being very close.
Absolutely.
I mean, let's compare it to Karen. And I mean, look at her in-laws were afraid of her before they met her. And they took the risk, right? And that's the biggest difference, I think. It's Karen is very open-minded, and her family she grew up was open-minded. Her husband's family, while they were scared of her initially, she made the effort of reaching out to them. And so it really is. I was very impressed with the first time she met her in-laws. It was in a public place. I think that's very important because it's a neutral territory. And her father-in-law or future father-in-law went okay, move them over, Mom. Hi. They knew how important this was they came to understand how important this was to their son, and they said, look, we can see the happiness on his face.
And that's all we care about in the end.
Yeah.
Exactly. So hopefully this can be the same situation for her as well.
Did you have any more questions tonight?
Well, we had the debate because some of us were saying, because he's coming specifically to visit her, if it does blow up, and then will he be more mad because she should have told him on the phone because he wouldn't have come down? At least he has a choice. That if you're coming down, I want you also to meet someone in my life that, or it doesn't matter, let him come down, and if he goes back home the next day, that's his problem.
Is Dad going to be staying with them?
Yes. Well, that's what Dad is expecting, because
we may want
before they moved in, Dad was staying at her apartment.
Okay.
Well, okay, is there somewhere else where Dad could potentially stay, like your place or another relative in town?
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
Okay. So, I mean, it's possible that she could say to Dad, maybe it'd be better if he stayed at Auntie Sal, sorry, I forgot your name, Auntie Teresa's house. I don't know if you're her aunt or not. And she may want to broach the topic with Dad beforehand, but, it's his choice whether he wants to come or not. Right? You don't want to booby trap Dad, because that's not fair. I mean, it's never fair to set anybody up for failure. So but yes, I think you need to have a conversation in this circumstance. So either, Dad, you need to stay somewhere else. I do want you to come up and see me, and my boyfriend is part of my life. He's an important part of my life, and and that's it. There's how many more ants can I add?
Does
Yeah.
that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank
so
you. I do
much.
appreciate.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Best of luck with the situation.
Thank you, ladies. Bye.
Bye.
We only have a few minutes left until the end of the show. I can't believe how quickly it's gone by, and I wanted to hear if you had any sort of any final parting thoughts for our viewers, maybe around why multicultural unions are so interesting to begin with. They're kind of
That's a hard question.
It is
they're kind of a litmus test for social relations between different groups, and maybe they're a sign that barriers are starting to be chipped away at slowly, little by little. But we did talk about multiculturalism earlier in our conversations, and we talked about the difference between having dim sum in Chinatown or hanging out in Little India enjoying the food and the music versus, oh yeah, it's okay if you marry my daughter or date my son. That's sort of another leap. Do you think we're there in Canada right now?
I think yes and no. I think it really is for myself.
Yeah.
It's dependent on the family and the people themselves. All right? Because when you look at Karen's family, you think about that because she's about our age, to think about families back then 30, 40 years ago, you know what, we're all human. Most people didn't actually think that way. There was pretty much, you're in this box, you're in that box, and these two boxes don't meet up. So I think more that we encourage to see people as people and to be open and understanding, because just because you belong to a certain group doesn't mean that you're a bad person or that you all think the same way. Because we don't.
No, we don't at all. I think there's still, like you said, it's still there a little bit. Yes, it was definitely there back a couple of years ago. Well, I should say decades ago. But in the last couple of years, it still stems a little bit, like the kind of the pushback not to want to get involved in a multicultural relationship, or
Not to commit
not to commit one.
full
Sorry,
time,
yes,
yeah.
so getting involved in one just to kind of test the waters and see what it's like, but not going fully through. Even when you're saying like, yes, I'm looking to settle down and commit, but it has to be with this kind of group, and you know that in the back of your head, but you're still willing to try it out because you're curious. There's still that's around and it's kind of still stemming a bit. But there are a lot of people like changing, like that are just accepting it and getting involved. Myself being one of them, my husband being another.
What are your hopes for your daughter?
All I would want for her is to really just grow up and to like not see the difference, like how I saw, like not seeing these different cultures, being intrigued by it and want to learn about cultures, but not see an individual for their culture, but for the person, and her to get involved with whomever. Like, I look forward to the day, well, not too soon, but when she's old enough, and, she brings home her first boyfriend, and, we sit down and we have dinner with him, and, and who knows, like, who knows what background he'll be, but it's not going to be an issue in our household. And I know with my husband, like, he's very good at that. He's always said from the beginning, he's like, race does not matter. And we're not raising her like that. We don't want her to start thinking that way. She's just going to accept people for the kindness that they have. So get to know the individual, and, if they're friends, they're friends, and that's how it will be.
Do you think that's realistic?
It'll be hard. It'll be hard. I mean, I think, we try to raise our children to actually, I tell my kids, everybody has a story to tell, no matter whether they're a homeless person or they're a millionaire. We all have a story. So it's about respect and caring and seeing people who they are, who's a genuine person. Yeah.
We're just at the end of our show tonight. I want to thank you so much, ladies, for your expertise and your stories. It's been really heartwarming, really inspiring to hear what you both have had to say. Thanks so much. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and make sure that you come back next week to watch my colleague Moni Dojeje in the studio. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great night.